We're telling the story of a man the world was supposed to protect, a man who sought refuge, a man who followed the law, and yet the law failed him. This is the story of Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, a Salvadoran national who, in 2019, was legally granted protection in the United States. A judge ordered it. The law guaranteed it. But somewhere along the way, humanity and justice got lost. This story, which we may come to realize, there are others who may be in the same situation that has yet to be identified. He was arrested on the 12th of March, 2025, and on the 18th of March, 2025, a few news media began to report about his story.
I trust our intelligence agencies and the intelligence individuals that are within the Department of Homeland Security, that the individuals who are there are members and a part of this organization and have worked with them. And while we were there at that prison, we not only talked about how to identify these members of these terrorist organizations, but what they did, their actions they took, the case files we built on them, and how we verified that those individuals should be there in that prison.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem expressing confidence that her agency is only removing criminals from the U.S. On Sunday night, 17 additional men were deported to a notorious prison in El Salvador. According to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the U.S. military only transported violent criminals, including murderers and rapists with gang affiliations. El Salvador's president posted another video yesterday showing the men in restraints as they were let off a U.S. Air Force plane. According to a senior State Department official, 7 of the men are Venezuelan citizens, while the other 10 are citizens of El Salvador. Meanwhile, the Trump administration acknowledged in a court filing yesterday it inadvertently deported a Maryland man to El Salvador because of an administrative error, but that U.S. courts are powerless to order his return. Kilmar Armando Garcia is a Salvadorian national who came to the U.S. at the age of 16 in 2011 after fleeing gang threats in his native land. According to Politico, he was deemed by an immigration judge in 2019 to be a likely member of the MS-13 gang, a decision he sharply contested and that the government credited to information gleaned from a confidential informant. But the court also agreed at the time that he should not be deported to El Salvador, finding that his fear of being persecuted or tortured was credible. On Monday, attorneys for the government admitted that Abrego Garcia was deported accidentally. Although ICE was aware of his protection from removal to El Salvador, Abrego Garcia was removed to El Salvador because of an administrative error. Trump lawyers said the court has no ability to bring him back now that he is in Salvadorian custody. The man's attorney is asking the court to order the Trump administration to ask for his return and, if necessary, to withhold payment to the Salvadorian government, which says it's charging the United States $6 million a year to jail U.S. deportees.
But in recent days, it has gained momentum as the outrage continues.
Senior ICE official says this was an oversight and the removal was carried out in good faith based on the existence of a final order of removal and Abrego Garcia's purported membership in MS-13. So the administration is maintaining that he has ties to MS-13. His attorney says that is not true. But the problem here for the attorneys, for the court, for the administration in these court documents is they can't get him back because he is now in Salvadoran custody. This is true as well with the other migrants that were sent on these deportation flights. So really the ball now is in El Salvador's court, and it's unclear what resolution there will be here. But this is an ongoing legal proceeding with another hearing on the horizon.
And Jeff, you cover the White House for us. I just want to say that Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, is speaking right now, and she doubled down on the notion that this man was part of a gang, MS-13, even though, as you said, we can't find any evidence that he was convicted of such a thing. What I just as a layman looking at this want to know is, Why can't they get him back?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I wish I knew the answer. I think what I would say, sort of on a step back level, is I remember when Elon Musk and the president were in the Oval Office together the first time, Elon said, we're going to make mistakes and then we'll fix them. But some of these mistakes, if they are mistakes, are not easily fixed. And that's an example in this case. I was in the Oval Office yesterday with the president, and I asked him if he had seen the video of that Tufts student who was removed from the street, and if he was comfortable with that, because that's one example of what his administration is doing on immigration. And he get in very Trumpian ways, like, oh, I saw it, but I didn't look closely, I'm not super familiar. There's this desire to kind of gloss over the things that really have a real impact on human beings.
I want to play the sound from Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, and then talk on the other end.
They have the highest degree of professionalism, and they were 100% confident in the individuals that were sent home on these flights and in the president's executive authority to do that.
So again, she was saying, look, these are criminals, these are gang members, but now the administration is admitting, look, actually one of these people, this Maryland father, this was an administrative error. I'm wondering, do you think the White House should release the full list, the identities of those who were deported? Because as you know, they didn't get the due process here in the U.S. They were sent to El Salvador.
I'm waiting to get more details on this one specific case, but the fact are there's been thousands of other cases in my eyes where there have been convicted criminal illegal aliens that are no longer on our streets. That's a positive thing. Now, look, one case, is that enough to have more transparency? Yes, it is. You want to get it right 100% of the time. I also want these 662,000 convicted criminal illegal aliens out of our country, and I don't want the Trump administration to slow down. I actually want them to speed up, and I also think the Congress has a role to play. Congress needs to ensure that they're giving them all the resources that the administration needs in order to accomplish that. But I do want transparency. The American people deserve transparency on what exactly is happening, not just some words.
As this rogue immigration custom enforcement agency operates without transparency as to who have been deported, we need to get their names out. Kilmar fled El Salvador, a country plagued by gang violence, systemic poverty, and corruption. Like many others, he didn't come to the United States to break the law. He came to survive. In 2019, after reviewing the facts, an immigration judge ruled in his favor. The court granted him protected status under U.S. law, meaning Kilmar could not legally be deported. That decision wasn't just paperwork, it was a legal shield. It meant that the U.S. recognized the danger he'd face if he was returned home. But in 2025, amid the Trump administration's aggressive immigration crackdown, something unthinkable happened. Kilmar was taken into custody by ICE. Despite the judge's ruling, despite the clear court order, he was deported. Not just deported anywhere. He was sent back to El Salvador and placed in Cecot, the notorious mega prison built for gang members and terrorists. Cecot isn't just a prison. It's a symbol of state repression. Critics call it a human rights nightmare. Overcrowded, brutal, inhumane. Kilmar had no criminal record in the U.S., no violent history. He wasn't a gang member. He was a protected refugee. In El Salvador's Terrorism Confinement Center, Cecot was created under President Nayib Bukele's iron fist crackdown on gangs. Thousands have been swept up, many without due process. Prisoners are crammed into cells by the hundreds. No sunlight, no outside contact, no lawyers. Torture and abuse have been reported by human rights organizations. And Kilmar? He was thrown into this nightmare despite a U.S. court saying he should never have been sent there. So, how did this happen? Monday, the 31st of March, 2025, the Trump administration admitted in a court filing that it mistakenly deported a Maryland father to El Salvador because of an administrative error, and stated there was no way to retrieve him because he is in Salvadoran custody. Since then, they have been trying to clean up the fallout. We, the people, believe it is part of a broader pattern of misconduct during the Trump era, a willful disregard for judicial oversight in the name of tough immigration. Error or not, the result is the same. A man protected by law was thrust into a hellscape, and the United States violated its own promise. What happens when the very system built to protect people becomes the one that harms them? Kilmar Abrego Garcia had legal protection. A federal judge said he cannot be deported. That wasn't a suggestion. It was the law. But under the Trump administration's brutal immigration agenda, that law was trampled. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't a paperwork error. It was a policy of indifference, a culture of cruelty where vulnerable people were statistics, not souls. Kilmar didn't vanish in a vacuum. He was pushed by a government that chose to ignore its own courts. He was forced onto a plane and sent into a system in El Salvador that's internationally condemned for torture, inhumane treatment, and mass detentions without trial. The irony? The very country that once promised Kilmar safety delivered him straight into a nightmare. This wasn't just a legal failure. It was a moral collapse. The United States broke its word. It betrayed its values. And it handed over a man to a prison meant for the violent and lawless when Kilmar himself had done nothing wrong.
New Jersey Democratic Senator Cory Booker has been speaking now for the past 15 hours straight on the floor of the U.S. Senate. Booker has been supported by other Democratic senators who joined him in speaking throughout the night. Booker is highlighting the case of an immigrant deported to El Salvador, even though the immigrant had protected status in the U.S.
Attorneys for several Venezuelan deportees have said that the Trump administration falsely labeled their clients as gang members because of their tattoos. But in Monday's court filing, attorneys for the government admitted that the Salvadorian man, Kilmar Armando Garcia, was deported accidentally.
The Atlantic has reported on the man's story. In a court filing, Trump administration officials say even though it was their mistake to deport the man, there's nothing they can do now because he is in El Salvador.
How many others has this happened to? How many voices have been silenced without headlines? Kilmar's exact status remains uncertain. Some reports suggest he's still detained. Others say he's disappeared within the Salvadoran prison system. His family in the U.S. has received no formal updates. His case is not just about one man. It's about the systems we trust to protect the vulnerable, and how easily those systems can break or be broken. We must not look away. We must keep Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia name in the headlines and fight for his return home to his family. If we were wrongly convicted, we would want the same for ourselves or loved ones. Remember, silence protects no one. We must continue to demand action, demand accountability. Stand up, speak up, and let the echoes of freedom break the silence. Please hit the like and subscribe button. As a new content creator fighting for democracy, pushing this video could help others. Additionally, if there is a story you would like for me to highlight, please feel free to send me an email at thesisoftheworld@yahoo.com.